One of the ways that we guard the good here at Wellington Square is being a place where everyone belongs. In a world of hate, in a world of division, in a world of fitting in and dressing up, that is how we guard the good. That's how we stand out, by being a place that loves, accepts, and welcomes in everyone. And today we're really honored to hear from one of you about what that means to them, about why that does matter, and why guarding the good is something we need to keep doing. And so as we are doing this fall, we're going to hear more and more stories from people in the community to learn about the impact that we have and why what we do matters. And so would you please give a very warm welcome to T. You're really tall, so I don't know if that's...
Oh, this should work.
That's perfect.
Okay,
all right.
Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. It's call and response, I love it. For those of you who don't know me, like Nick just said, my name is T, and I've been coming to Wellington Square for about a year now. If you've only ever seen me playing piano, you'd think logically that because I'm used to being up there at the front that speaking doesn't terrify me, but it does. So when I look down at my notes just a little too much, or forget what I'm saying, I'm sorry. But I'm speaking to you guys today because a couple of months ago now at one of our Faith and Decaf evenings, I'd shared a little with the group that was there just, what was going on in my life and where I'm at in faith. And Nick came up to me afterwards and was like, hey, would you be willing to share that with the congregation? And because it's Nick, I can't say no. And I eventually agreed. But as I've been kind of thinking the last few weeks about what I wanted to say, I realized it's the same thing that we do in our faith all the time, which is what Nick calls talking about the thing behind the thing. So it's not me I want to talk about. It's you guys. It's Wellington Square. Why this place matters to me, and why it's important that we are the church that we are. And I'm not telling you anything new. It's not stuff that we don't already know. But as we've been talking today about guarding the good, this is the good of this church, And I know I just said I wasn't going to talk about me, but I'm now going to immediately talk about me. So I'm going to give you guys just a little bit of a baseline for where I was in 2024 before I came to church here. And I don't want to do that to bring down your Sunday morning or because I like talking about me, but I want to just give you a real world example of what a difference coming to Wellington Square can have. So 2024 for me was a really rough year, and I could go on and on and on about it, but I'm going to try and give you what I've been told I have to call the Coles Notes version of that. And so 2024 was rough. There were health issues, and as soon as I got on top of those, I came home one day and my housemates are sat in the front room and they say, hey, we have to move, which is gone. You sure? Sorry. Wonderful. So my roommates sat in the front room and they say, hey, we have to move, which is not great because I'd been living there for a year at that point. And so all of a sudden I'm looking for a new place. And I loved my roommates, but I also knew if I came back to the house in a mess one more time, I was going to kill them. So I realized I also had to live alone, and living alone came with its own challenges, not least of which financial. I loved the job I had at the time, but its salary was not one of its strengths. So I was then looking for a new job, and I ended up moving into my new place and also starting my new role on the same day. And so that was like a stressful, heavy start to 2024. And normally, if I was going for a rough time, I'd turn to and lean on my friends. But just in the perfect storm that was 2024, some of those friends that I had known for years and I cared and loved about deeply, those friendships ended for a whole variety of reasons. And so what that meant was that whilst I was going through what was a difficult year for me, I just felt incredibly alone. Last summer, my partner at the time goes AWOL on me for a few days. She isn't picking up phone calls or responding to texts or showing up to work. And her brother's not heard from her in a few days. And eventually it gets to the point where I am calling hospitals, just trying to see if she's been admitted somewhere, because I'm trying to track this girl down. And just as I'm about to call the cops, because it's got to that stage where no one's heard from her, she calls me, and she tells me that she's been battling an alcohol use disorder. And as if all of this wasn't enough and the accent hasn't come through and given it away by now, I'm not from here originally. I'm from the UK. I moved here in 2022 on a work permit that was due to expire in October of last year. And I'd applied for an extension, but by August that still hadn't come through. So underlying all of the stress and heartache and pain and challenges of last year was the fact that I ended up 6 weeks away from not knowing where I was going to be living, what country that would be in, and I had absolutely zero plans for what that would look like. And that's where I was in life when I got to the stage where I went, let me go back to church. I hadn't been to church in 10 years. I hadn't felt like part of a church community in a long, long time before that. But everything had just gotten to the stage where I went, what have you got to lose? So I started looking online for different kinds of churches and trying to research what all your Canadian denominations stood for, because I don't know what a United Church is. And I eventually was posting online and someone recommended Wellington Square. So I came in and I sat towards the back, obviously, and I listened to Nick talk, and I cried throughout the entire service. You know, a year's worth of emotions that I'd just been trying to keep on top of just came flooding out of me. And I filled in one of our blue cards and I handed it to Nick. And at the end of the service, you know, I sat with him a week later in his office and I told him the much, much longer version of what I just told you guys. I spent maybe 90 minutes with him and I was sobbing the entire time. And you know, I'd love to tell you that ever since I've been at Wellington Square, everything's been great and fine and, you know, life is perfect, but that's not how life works. But I can tell you that learning to have faith in and with this community has genuinely been life-changing. And I am so aware of how cliche that sounds, but you don't have to take my word for it. You know, you can ask all the guys who know me. They will tell you what a change they see in this past year. And a huge part of that change is because of the community that we are, you know, the kind of church that we are. Each week we start by saying some version of you belong here, you know. Nick will come in and he'll do his, it doesn't matter who you are or where you're at in life or what you believe or who you love, or you belong here. And I'm sure there are times where you sit there and you go, we get it. You say this every week. And it just feels like we're going through the motions. And truly, I get it. You know, I've had that conversation with Nick. But we're not just going through the motions when we say those things, you know. We genuinely, truly embrace those words. And they make a difference because they enable our church to grow in such wonderful ways. You know, when we take those words to heart and we truly follow them as a church, as a community, we are choosing to worship God in a way that expands His love. Nick has said a lot lately how the world often feels like we are being torn in two directions and we are being told to take a side, and everyone is saying that their side is right and anyone else's side is wrong. And historically, that's the approach that a lot of churches have taken to, you know. As Christians, we haven't always sought to worship God in a way that expands His love, but have done so in a way that makes it available to only a certain few who live their life in a certain way. And there's a whole lot of issues with that, but the biggest one for me is that it puts people off church, which is crazy. You know, part of the reason I stayed away from church for so long was because church has a bad rep, and I know that's a weird thing to say in front of a church full of people. But it's not just me who says that, you know. You can talk to people about faith, and I'm sure most of the people in this room have heard some version of, you know, someone who doesn't go to church saying, I have no problem with God, but I have an issue with the church or organized religion. And what they aren't saying there, but they might as well be, is that people are getting in the way of the message, you know. People historically have used the name of God to target and ostracize communities that are different. You know, there are people who I love incredibly dearly who have been hurt in unimaginable ways by people who claim to be acting in the name of God. And that is, incredibly upsetting and infuriating. But that's not the God that we believe in, No part of the God that we believe in that encourages excluding people or preaching hatred, We believe in a God of unimaginable love. I choose to spend my Sunday mornings here with you guys because we all believe in the same God. We gather and we worship the God that we see working in the world, which is a God who loves indiscriminately. When we start our services each week by saying that everybody is welcome, that matters because, we leave no space for second guessing who we are or what we believe in. When we say that, we create a space that facilitates what we all deserve, and that is a relationship with a God who loves us just as we are. Over the last few weeks, as I've kind of been sitting and thinking about faith, I've realized one of the most daunting aspects of coming back to church has been realizing that ultimately faith is a choice. And for some people, that is a choice to believe in a God who judges and condemns, and for some people, we choose to believe in a God of unbelievable love. And truly, it has been a privilege coming to this church for the past year and worshiping that God that we see with a community full of people. I mentioned earlier I'm from the UK, and unfortunately I moved back in a few weeks. Wow, that was a bad idea to look at the young adults because they're all a mess too. That's great. Yeah. So in many ways, at this point of the year, at this point in my life, I'm facing a lot of the same issues and challenges I was facing last year. I don't know where I'm going to live. I don't know what my life looks like in 8 weeks. I'm navigating changing relationships and friendships. But ultimately, this year is so much different and so much better than last year because of you guys. That's why our church matters. It matters that we are the way that we are because it creates these wonderful little opportunities for people like me when so many churches don't. We open up transformative experiences, and not just for me, but for anybody who calls this church home. It doesn't matter if you've been here your entire life, or if you've not gone to church in 10 years, or if you walked in off the street one Christmas, This church does wonderful things for people. And I'm so proud when people ask where I go to church, so I tell them it's Wellington Square. One of the very few good things about having to leave is that I get to tell you guys what you mean to me. And it's also been so wonderful, over the past few weeks, I hear that back from so many of you guys too. As more and more people have found out, I've kind of talked to them. And time again, that message has just been the same thing of you belong here, You always will. And it doesn't matter if you are my friends or my partner or my minister or, if we have played in the band together. Wow, that was a bad idea too. It doesn't matter if we've gone for breakfast or, you write my name tag for me as we walk in, or Jeff Rice if we have sat in the back of Dave Holloway's car squished together, Everybody has said, you belong. And I feel so very fortunate to know you guys, and as a community and a congregation, we are so blessed to have compassionate people who lead with love and have goodness in their hearts. And so very quickly, I do just want to say thank you to a few of them. First and foremost, I'm going to look down at my notes and not directly at them, but the rowdy group of 20 to 30 somethings that I sit with every week. You guys genuinely mean the world to me, and there is nothing I can say right now that you guys don't already know. Stop crying. You're fine. I love you guys. To our band, especially Kate and Alicia, who I never get to play with, but it is a privilege to listen to every week. Thank you guys for welcoming me with open arms, just as the rest of the church has. and for creating so many wonderful opportunities to praise and worship together. Like, you guys are great. Our ministry and personnel team, our board, Nick, Kim, and Adam, thank you for guiding us in the direction that we have always meant to be heading. You know, and for fostering this community that I have been so fortunate to call home. And finally, you guys, the congregation. And I know I've not spoken to all of you or a lot of you. I am also very aware that Wellington Square as it exists today is not the same church that existed, 5 or 10 years ago. I know if I had walked in off the street 5 or 10 years ago, I would have walked out and not come back. But our church only exists the way it does today because of a desire for change and to learn and to grow and to lead with love and compassion. So I'm going to wrap up with this. I'm so grateful to have found this church when I did. My hope for this community is that we continue to grow and be an example to every other church that the way that you do that is to constantly lead with love. Our religion is beyond complex, but fundamentally at the heart of it all is an endless outpouring of love, from God, for one another. Our mission statement as a church is to seek the way of Jesus together. And when we do that, we open the door for everybody to, go on this beautiful, radical journey that I have been so fortunate to have this past year. So genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys so much for being part of this community, for embodying our mission statement, and making Wellington Square my home. Thank you. Thank you.